Ashes alone would not cause such destruction as Niven depicts, so we must look for some other agent as being the force that caused the walls to crumble and the roofs to fall. One of the probable causes was earthquake shock, preceding and accompanying the outburst of the volcano, which caused the land to rock, rise, and fall until the structures came crashing down. The Troano manuscript, describing the earthquakes in a later period of the Earth's history, says, being constantly shaken by the fires of the underneath, and confined these caused the land to sink and to rise several times. The Codex Cortesianus says, the land trembled and shook like the leaves of a tree in a storm. The Lhasa record repeats this. I will now pass up to the second city 14 to 16 feet under the surface of the earth. Over this city there is a layer of boulders, rocks, pebbles, gravel, and sand from 4 to 6 feet in thickness. In his report, Niven does not state whether the lowest city, in addition to the volcanic ash, was covered with boulders, gravel, and sand. Volcanoes do not pile up layers of boulders, gravel, and sand, so I must refer to geology to find out what agent does. We must ascertain the known agent that forms strata of boulders, gravel, and sand. Geologically, it is known that deposits of boulders, gravel, and sand are the work of water, huge tidal or cataclysmic waves, which gather up the stones along their paths and roll and tumble them along until the force of the water can carry them no farther. Then they settle and form a deposit, the biggest and heaviest dropping first, then gradually diminishing in size until sand only is carried in the dying wave. The strata of boulders, pebbles, and sand which cover the first and second cities were therefore brought in by tidal waves or cataclysms from the ocean. The waves which brought in these deposits certainly came from an ocean. Now we find the cities 7,000 feet above the level of the ocean, with mountains thousands of feet higher surrounding the plain in which they have been found. No tidal waves or cataclysms could assume a height that would reach the plateau forming the Valley of Mexico, much less pass over the mountains surrounding the valley. Such a wave or waves would destroy the whole earth. Not a vestige of life would be left upon it. It would be impossible to form a wave even 200 feet high from volcanic workings. As we proceed, the situation becomes more complex. I should say that tidal waves or cataclysms from oceans swept over and overwhelmed the Valley of Mexico at least twice, if not 3 times. It is distinctly shown that 2 great overwhelming waves from an ocean swept over this land at varying intervals, possibly and probably thousands of years apart, but each time destroying all life on the land. I doubt if any trace of the volcano which destroyed the lowest city with its ashes could be found today except by an accident. The crater no doubt was filled in and obliterated by the 2 cataclysms that followed. Let us for a moment consider the loss of life when the first city was destroyed, a city of 200 square miles. Millions must have perished in the city alone, without taking into consideration other cities and the surrounding country destroyed by the cataclysm. The Earth's greatest tragedies have never been recorded. The cataclysmic waves which overran cities 1 and 2 started a long distance away and had much of their force when they had arrived at the cities. This is demonstrated by the size of the boulders, which Niven says are small. The boulders are corroborated by the thickness of the deposit. It must be remembered, however, that what is found covering the cities is not all that the waves carried on their errands of destruction. All large boulders had been dropped before arriving at the cities, and much was carried on beyond them. The deposits over these cities show only what was dropped en route. These deposits of boulders, rocks, gravel, and sand absolutely and most conclusively prove that at the time they were made, the land was only a few feet above the ocean's level. During the time these cities were in existence, there were no mountains or mountain ranges between Mexico City and the oceans, and the plateau on which Mexico City stands had not at that time been raised to its present altitude of 7,400 feet above the level of the sea. The probability is that all Mexico at the time of these cities was flat land less than 100 feet above sea level. Had the present mountains existed then, or had the Valley of Mexico been at its present level or elevation, it would have been impossible for any tidal wave or cataclysm to reach the doomed cities, much less carry along boulders with which to bury them. The foregoing is one of the many examples that verify my contention. Mountains and mountain ranges are of comparatively recent origin in the history of the earth because the mountain ranges were formed by the gas belts. That up to the time of the earth went into final magnetic balance at the end of the Pliocene, the gases were not controlled, and until they were controlled, mountains could not be raised. Thus, up to the beginning of the Pleistocene, no mountains or mountain ranges existed on the earth's surface. I notice from various publications that the European geologists are wavering in their opinions regarding the age of mountains. As the ancient Mexican cities existed before the mountains were raised, it is clear that they antedate the Pleistocene period. Therefore, they are Tertiary era cities. If the last one, the upper one, was built and destroyed before the Pleistocene dawned, according to geological calculations, which, as I have pointed out, are absurd, the upper city must be over 200,000 years old. If the upper city is over 200,000 years old, what must be the age of the third or lowest? All three cities date back to the Tertiary era. I think the lowest city is at least 50,000 years old. It is impossible to say what volcanic workings took place in this vicinity before gas belts were formed, but judging from geological phenomena corroborated by old Maya traditions, they must have been very violent. Mexico, Central America, and the West Indies have one of the greatest gas-belted conjunctions that have been formed within the Earth's crust. Here various belts not only join, but some pass over and under others. It is one of the Earth's greatest volcanic danger spots. Anything may happen in this vicinity if one or more of the belts become choked. The volcanic workings in this area during the formation of the gas belts were extremely violent. Violent upheaval of lands both above and below the waters took place. The raising of submarine lands naturally caused tidal waves through the displacement of the waters. Parts of all the principal gas belts are underneath the beds of the ocean. There is no saying how much land was submerged or how much land was emerged by those volcanic workings. 4 continental stretches, we know, were submerged. The raising of the ocean bed displaced the waters above. These displaced waters took the shape of great waves which rolled in over adjacent low-lying lands, destroying everything that lay in their paths. The size and height of the wave and its power of destruction would naturally be governed by the area and height of the submarine land raised. As soon as the gas belts were formed and the mountains raised, such destructive cataclysms were prevented. It is geologically admitted, as we have previously pointed out, that the European ape-like beings, the Piltdown man, the Heidelberg man, and the Neanderthal man, lived sometime during the early Pleistocene, or after the date of Niven's upper city. Thus Niven's discoveries emphatically show that man was in America in a highly civilized and cultured state tens of thousands of years before the European ape-like men lived, and proves beyond question that they were individuals and not types. Niven, while showing and distinctly stating that 2 of the cities were overrun and destroyed by cataclysms, apparently does not take into consideration that cataclysmic waves can come only from oceans, and that ocean waves could not possibly reach the Mexican Valley. The 2 concrete pavements above the lowest city show the handiwork of 2 subsequent colonizations. These 2 colonizations were destroyed by cataclysms. As boulders, pebbles, and sand are the covering, it shows that the volcanic workings, the result of which destroyed these cities, were underneath the ocean far away. An exceptionally great geological value is attached to this discovery from the fact that the phenomenon is twice repeated. The thickness of the deposits of boulders, gravel, and sand does not in any way intimate the time that elapsed between the building of the cities. It only intimates the size and scope of the waves that brought in the material. I have received information that it has been determined that the boulders which cover the upper and the second city originated on the Pacific coast of Mexico. What happened between this ancient civilization and our own, that only the merest fragments of the great past remain? I have already answered this question in previous chapters. Niven's discoveries merely prove that my answer is the correct one. Niven's second great discovery. In a rural district 4 to 5 miles northwest of Mexico City, Niven made another great find, which in some respects is of even greater importance than the one just mentioned. Among other objects he unearthed were over 2,600 stone tablets, which are over 12,000 years old. Among the enormous collection I have found many that directly refer to Mu. I am giving a selection of this group with their decipherings and translations. A full and detailed account of this find appears in a companion book to this, The Children of Mu, by William Niven, who wrote the details especially for these books. They appear under his signature. Number 4. An altar painting. This painting is on a stone 7 feet high and 5 feet wide by 1.5 feet thick, and weighs over a ton. Niven says it formed part of an altar. The writing on it is a dedication to the sacred four. It is a masterpiece of symbolization, for they have succeeded in getting a dual meaning to almost every line on it. It is not at all difficult to read. Dissection and deciphering. To make it more easily understood, as it has 3 natural archaeological divisions, I shall decipher Division 1, the crown; Division 2, the plume; Division 3, the body and dress. The crown. The crown is composed of 4 box scallops numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4. The ends of the crown are resting on the hieratic letter H, marked A and B. The crown is red. H is the alphabetical symbol for the sacred four. 4 is the numeral symbol for the sacred four. The crown symbolizes the sacred four, the 4 great primary forces emanating from the Creator. C. The plume. This plume is an ornament on the front of the crown. It is composed of 7 yellow-colored rays or feathers. Yellow feathers are worn only by royalty, so the color of this plume tells us it belongs to a king. D. The body. The body is an oblong square forming the hieratic letter M. M is Mu's alphabetical symbol, so the body which is colored yellow is that of Mu. E. The head. Joined to the top of this oblong square is a conventional human head, the head of Ra-Mu, the high priest of Mu. The name is indicated by the ear ornaments, which are suns surrounded by rays. F. Neck ornaments. These consist of 3 suns with rays. 3 is Mu's numeral symbol, and suns with rays her escutcheon symbol. G. The arms. The conventional arms, colored red, are formed of the glyph reading builder. H. The sash. A yellow sash divides the body from the lower limbs. Resting on the knees are the fingers of the hand. 5. The numeral symbol of the full Godhead. I. The skirt. The skirt is divided between the knees by the glyph reading the great or master builder. K. Hieratic letter H. Below the hands on either side is the hieratic letter H, symbol of the sacred four, the 4 great primary forces. These are also in yellow. L. 3 circles. This is the great Naga glyph for the numeral 3, Mu's numeral. They are red. Below the body the feet project, showing 5 toes, which have the same significance as the 5 fingers. M. The cloak. Enveloping the body is a cloak in red. The edging of this cloak is composed of 3 box scallops, thus by numeral symbol again saying Mu. Legend. This temple is dedicated to the great Creator, at whose commands the 4 great primary forces, emanating from within himself, evolved law and order through the universe and created all things. The temple is under the jurisdiction of Ra-Mu, the king high priest of the motherland, Mu, mouthpiece of the great Creator. This is a particularly valuable writing, for it informs us that this civilization flourished at the time Mu was above water. This because the temple was under her jurisdiction, and therefore must have been before Mu was submerged. Mu was submerged about 10,000 BC. We must have proof that this great American civilization dates back more than 12,000 years. One of Niven's Mexican stone tablets, the drawing on this stone is a conventional human face. The outline of the head is made to follow the contour of the stone. It was found by Niven at Hacienda Leon. It is a wonderful little stone. It talks in the language and writing of Mu, the motherland, and says, Mu the motherland, the lands of the west. The writing is composed of Naga glyphs only. There is not a single Uyghur or Northern character. It is in exactly the same characters as are found on the sacred inspired writings of Mu. Dissected, the characters read, deciphering in translation the outline of the head. 1. The nose. 2. An eye, an elongated square, and the hieratic letter M in Mu's alphabet. 1. The nose and the two eyes, 2 letters M. 3. The mouth composed of 2 oblong squares, 2 letters M, one within the other. Being within each other, the symbol constitutes 2 of the meanings of the letter M, or a dual meaning to the mouth. One M symbolizes Mu, the other symbolizes Mother. 4. The chin is composed of a perfect four-sided square, the first and original symbol of the earth, and by permitted extension also depicts land. The 2 eyes and the mouth constitute 3 M's. 3 is Mu's numeral symbol. This may be used as an adjective emphasizing the fact that the 3 M's each say Mu, or it may be applied as saying the lands of the West, the figure 3 being the numeral symbol for both. So the writing on the face reads, Mu, the motherland, Mu, the lands of the West. The oblong square, the symbol of the mouth and eyes, was used by the ancients all over the world. It is found on carvings in India. It appears as the mouths of the symbolic beasts at Angkor. It is seen on the handle of Prince Maya's knife, page 155. It is shown on the great monolith of Tiahuanaco, Peru, page 164. It is carved on Yucatan ruins, to mention only a few instances of this use. Number 1055, Dissection and Deciphering, Figure 1. This is the Uyghur or Northern pattern of the sun as Ra, the symbol of the Creator, the deity. Figure 2. This is a 3-pointed figure, one of the principal symbols of Mu, her numeral symbol. Figure 3 is a tongue, the symbol of talk and speech. This tongue projects from Ra, therefore it is the speech of the deity. Figure 4. This is another tongue, but is connected to both Ra and Mu, so it is the Creator, the deity, that is, speaking through Mu. Legend. The Creator, the deity, speaks through the mouth of Mu. Number 1780. Dissection and Translation. Figure 1 is the headdress of a high priest, the ornament being 3 feathers, Mu's numeral. The feather is the symbol of truth. Figure 2. As the ornament consists of 3 feathers, it has an extended meaning. 3 feathers were allowed to be worn only by the king and the high priest. In Mu, the king was also the high priest, so this is the head of Ra Mu, the king high priest. Figure 3 is the mouth of the high priest. Figure 4 is a connection between the mouth and the left eye. Figure 5. Around the left eye is a large circle, which is the sun, the symbol of the Creator, the Almighty. Being connected with the mouth, the Creator is speaking through the mouth of Ra Mu. Figure 6. Around the right eye is a small circle, which is the symbol of the moon, night. Legend. By day and by night the eyes of the Creator see all things, and through the mouth of Ra Mu speaks truth. Number 51. Dissection and Deciphering. Figure 1. On the headdress is a Tau, the symbol of resurrection and immersion. Figure 2. The head of the Tau is formed by the hieratic letter M, Mu's alphabetical symbol. Figure 3. Falling from the headdress at each end in bars is the numeral 3, Mu's numeral symbol. Figure 4 are closed sightless eyes, as the face is that of a human. It says the eyes of man have not yet looked upon this land. Man has not yet appeared. Figure 5. Directly below the chin is the ancient symbol of the earth's center, the fires of the underneath, volcanic gases, telling us that the land was raised above the water by the agency of volcanic gases. This glyph, with its explanation, appears in the sacred inspired writings of the motherland. Figure 6. On each side of the face is the symbol, Naga pattern of the Creator. thus saying it was by the Creator's demand or desire that the land was raised. Figure 7. The box figures with lines refer to the four great primary forces and their workings. Legend. By command of the great Creator, the Nameless, whose symbol is the sun called Ra, the sacred four, the four great primary forces, which emanate from his wishes and desires, put the fires of the underneath into action, for the purpose of using their powers and force to raise the bed of the ocean until it appeared above the waters for man, who was to be created to live upon. The land was raised according to command, and man was created upon it, and the name thereof is the land of Mu. Tablet number 1. The engraving on this tablet is the ground plan of a temple. The tablet was found at San Miguel Amantla, which is quite close to Santiago Ahuizotla, where the altar with its painting described on prior pages was found. Owing to the close proximity of the two places, it seems possible that this ground plan was of the temple which held the altar, especially as the temple symbolizes the sacred four. Too much stress, however, cannot be laid on this because there are several temple plans among Niven's collection, and every one of them is dedicated to the sacred four. There are two inscriptions on this stone, which is one of the very rare Mexican stone tablets having a writing of any description. Archaeologically, the tablet has three divisions to note in deciphering, as each one is independent of the others. Division 1, Figure 1. In the center at the top is a human face. This will be shown to be the face of Ra-Mu, the hieratic head of Mu, the motherland. Figure 2a and b. These are his two hands outspread in benediction and blessing. Figure 3 is a symbol of the sun as Ra, the collective symbol of the Creator, thus following that the blessings and benediction refer to the infinite, being placed below the hand it equals coming from. Figure 4 is a symbol of the sun as Kui, its name as the celestial orb. Symbol 3. In addition to other names, carried with it King of Kings, the insertion of Kui shows it to be the earthly King of Kings. Thus the top reads, Benedictions and blessings on your temple and people from Ra-Mu, the King High Priest of the Empire of the Sun, the mouthpiece of the King of Kings, the Creator, the Almighty. Division 2, Figure 1. This is the ground plan of the temple within its four walls, showing four rooms on each side of a central one, the Holy of Holies. Figure 2. This is a square pillar on the left side of the entrance to the temple. A square is the symbol of strength, so this pillar symbolizes strength. Figure 3. This is a round or rounded pillar and is situated on the right-hand side of the entrance to the temple. A pillar which is round is the symbol of establishment or completion, so this pillar symbolizes establishment. Within each of these pillars are drawn 5 lines with a line across them as an adjective to emphasize. 5 was the numeral symbol of the full Godhead, the Creator, and his 4 great primary forces. Accordingly, the pillars say, This temple is established in strength to the Creator, the Almighty. Figure 4. This is a glyph appearing on the Holy of Holies. It is a Uyghur or northern form of writing and reads, A temple of truth dedicated to the sun, the deity, and under the jurisdiction of the motherland. Division 3, Figure 1. This is a cartouche which appears at the entrance of the temple between the pillars. Figure 2. This is a compound glyph composed of the two letters T and M as shown in 2a. The M is the hieratic glyph for Mu, the lands of the West. The T indicates which or what. Straight reading would be simply Mu, the lands of the West. Figure 3 is a rising sun on the horizon. Without rays, the ancient symbol for a colony. When rays were shown, it was the symbol of a colonial empire. Thus it is shown that this land was one of Mu's colonies. Figure 4. Attached to the edge of the rising sun is a name, the name of the colony. As I can only partially read it, I shall leave the name blank. The writing within this cartouche says, This is the land of blank, a colony of Mu, the lands of the West. Chapter 12. Yucatan's place among the ancient civilizations. On leaving Niven's treasures, I shall proceed to that part of Mexico called Yucatan. Yucatan is situated in the southeastern part of Mexico and forms a peninsula stretching out from the mainland in an easterly direction. It is bounded on the north by the Gulf of Mexico and on the east and southeast by the Caribbean Sea. Yucatan is literally filled with the remains of ancient civilizations, although none are as old as Niven's buried cities. Central America and Yucatan formed one of the first colonies established from the motherland. Eventually it became an empire and was called Mayax. I shall deal first with what are thought to be the most ancient of these ruins. They consist of temples, tombs, and government buildings, all of stone, and are either partially or completely covered with earth. Next, I shall take the structures completely above the ground, the ages of which have been variously estimated to be from 2,000 to 15,000 years. Quoting from ancient writings would seem to show that the youngest of these structures is at least 15,000 years old, and there is every reason to believe that most of them are more than 15,000 years old. Some of them are, I am sure. I think my readers will agree that it was not the hand of man that caused the walls of these massive buildings to crack and split and the stones to fall. It was the result of volcanic workings from the great central gas belt was forging its way under Yucatan. Up to that time these buildings stood intact. As a guide, every building that has carvings on it of the feathered serpent, Kukulkan, is 15,000 or more years old. These buildings were erected during the Khan Serpent Dynasty. The Khan Dynasty ended with Queen Mu. Queen Mu lived during the first century of Egyptian history. Dr. Plongeon and his wife, Alice de la Plongeon, dear friends of the writer, were the first archaeological explorers to delve among the buried parts of Yucatan ruins. Their published works give many interesting details of their discoveries. Not one half of their discoveries, however, were published. Before the death of Dr. de Plongeon, he gave the writer his unpublished notes and translations for copy, so that what I say about Yucatan comes principally from the result of Dr. Le Plongeon's 12 years among the ruins, much of which, however, I have corroborated by a personal examination. My first notes on Yucatan remains will concern some archaeological records unearthed by Le Plongeon. The Temple of Sacred Mysteries. At Uxmal there is an ancient Maya temple which Le Plongeon in his works has called the Temple of Sacred Mysteries. The inscriptions on the walls, combined with the profusion of sacred symbols carved thereon, are themselves a chapter of prehistoric history. They connect ancient man with the early history of Babylonia and Egypt. This building, an emblem of the lands of the West, is composed of 3 compartments. The door of the central chamber, the Holy of Holies, faced west, in the direction where once the motherland stood, corresponding in this respect to the temples and statuary found at Angkor, Cambodia, which all faced east towards the vanished land. From the central chamber, a small stairway led to a terrace formed by this sanctuary. The doors of the other 2 rooms faced east. The ceilings formed a triangular arch. Inside the triangle, formed at each end of the 2 rooms facing east by the converging lines of the arch, are semispheres. Those of the north room, 3 in number, form a triangle, as shown in Chapter 8, page 115, figure 7. Those in the south room consisted of 5, as shown on page 115, figure 8. A few centimeters above the lintel of the entrance to the sanctuary is a cornice that surrounds the whole edifice. On it are sculptured and many times repeated the skeleton with crossbones shown in Chapter 8, page 120, figure 14. The most remarkable of all the symbols found in the Temple of Sacred Mysteries is the cosmogonic diagram of Mu, Chapter 9, page 146, the diagram of man's first religion, which I have already shown. The Temple of Sacred Mysteries is more than 11,500 years old, and this age is verified by the following. Plutarch relates that the priest of Egypt told Solon that communications with the lands of the West had been interrupted 9,000 years before in consequence of the sinking of Atlantis, which made the Atlantic impassable on account of the mud and seaweed, and the destruction of the country beyond by overwhelming cataclysms. Solon visited Egypt in 600 BC. Atlantis sank 900 years previous to this. Thus, by adding AD 2000 to 600 plus 9000, we get a date of 11,600 years ago. Further proofs of this destructive cataclysm are given in the writings of the Spanish historian Dr. Aguilar, who relates, "In a book which I took from the idolaters there was an account of an inundation to which they gave the name Onuisit, flooding, and this is geologically further confirmed by the strata around the bases of these old structures. How long the Temple of Sacred Mysteries had been standing beyond the period I have assigned to it no one can say, but certainly not long, because this temple was a memorial commemorating the loss of the lands of the West, and they disappeared only a short time before the disappearance of Atlantis. Le Plongeon found an inscription on the temple walls which reads as follows: This edifice is a memorial commemorating the destruction of Mu, the lands of the West, whence came our sacred mysteries. This inscription I had verified by a native gentleman who thoroughly understood the Maya writings. Being a memorial, emblem, or monument to the lands of the West, it follows that this temple was erected after the lands of the West had disappeared. Le Plongeon also found an inscription on one of the buildings saying that Uxmal had been destroyed by earthquakes 3 times and had been 3 times rebuilt. It is today known among the educated natives as the thrice-built city. Niven's Mexican buried cities are, comparatively speaking, only a few miles away from Uxmal, so that there remains the possibility that the disturbances which caused the ruin of Niven under cities might, and probably did, extend as far as Uxmal. Some of our scientists who have been picnicking at Chichen Itza come back with the tale that these old structures were built only 1,500 years ago. As a matter of fact, most of them were standing 11,500 years ago, and some of them are certainly older than that. I refer to those built during the Peiou dynasty, which immediately preceded the Khan dynasty. One great authority on the antiquity of the Yucatan Maya ruins was Bishop Landa, who accompanied the Spanish under Cortes in the 16th century. Landa, in his work written 400 years ago, Relación de las Cosas, page 328, says, "The ancient buildings of the Mayas at the time of the arrival of the Spaniards were already heaps of ruins, objects of awe and veneration to the aborigines who lived in their neighborhood. They had lost the memory of who built them and the object for which they were created. The Maya priests wrote books about their sciences and imparted their knowledge to others whom they considered worthy of enlightenment. They had books containing the early history of their own nation and that of other people with whom they had friendly intercourse or war. In these volumes there were complete records of what had taken place in different epochs of the various wars, inundations, epidemics, plagues, famines, and every important event. Landa burnt thousands of these books and 27 large manuscripts on parchment. He destroyed 5,000 statues and 197 vases. Cogaludo, in Historia de Yucatan, Book 4, Chapter 3, page 177, says, "Of the people who first settled in this kingdom of Yucatan, or their ancient history, I have been unable to obtain any other data than those which follow. The Spanish chronicles do not give one reliable word about the manners and customs of the builders of the grand antique edifices that were objects of admiration to them, as they are now to modern travelers. The only answer of the natives to the inquiries of the Spaniards as to who the builders were invariably was, 'We do not know.' It is not known who the builders were, and the Indians themselves have no traditions on the subject." Lizana, Historia de Nuestra Senora de Utsamal, Chapter 2. When the Spaniards came to this country, notwithstanding that some of the monuments appeared new, as if they had been built only 20 years, the Indians did not live in them, but used them as temples and sanctuaries, offering in them sacrifices, sometimes of men, women, and children, and that their construction dates back to great antiquity. Le Plongeon says, "These buildings were neither constructed by the present race nor their ancestors." Pedro Beltram, Arte del Idioma Maya, in the Maya sculptures certainly on the trunks of the mastodon heads that adorn the most ancient buildings, the name is written, "That which is necessary." The Plangion, among the symbols sculptured on the mastodon's trunks that at a very remote period in Maya history embellished the facades of all sacred and public edifices, these signs are occasionally seen. See page 229. Taken collectively, they read shock, thunder. The great Maya edifices did not totter and fall from age and decay, nor was their ruin wrought by the hand of man. Their destruction was first due to volcanic workings and was completed by water. During the forging of the great central gas belt under Central America and Yucatan 11,500 years ago, huge cataclysmic waves were formed. These rolled in over the land. All during the time of the splitting and rending of the rocks in forming the belt, earthquakes shook the land like the leaves of a tree in a storm. The land rose and rolled like ocean waves. The shocks and rolls from the quakes shook the Maya structures into ruins. The great waves of water following blotted out all life, including the white Mayas of Yucatan. Thus, not only were the structures destroyed, but the builders as well. The work of these cataclysmic waves is to be seen today in the form of sand, gravel, and small boulders around and against the old ruins, and in some cases where the buildings were completely shaken down, this specialized stratum covers them. Some old Egyptian papyri refer to these cataclysms, which are confirmed by the Greek philosophers Plato and Plutarch's Life of Solon. After these cataclysms had passed over Central America and Yucatan, wrecking the structures and wiping out the whole population, the country for a long time was uninhabitable. As soon as the land became fit for man again, surrounding people drifted in and took possession of it. These were brown races speaking the Maya language. These brown races were not part of the white Mayas. Although they spoke the Maya tongue, they were totally different and without doubt came from a long way off. They were a new set of colonizers. This would account for there being no traditions found among them at the time the Spaniards conquered the country. These newcomers were neither Nahuatls nor Aztecs. The Nahuatls came from the south and conquered them. The Aztecs also came from the south and in turn conquered the country. The brown races of Central America and Yucatan of today are the descendants of these various peoples, a mixture of the three tribes, mostly Mongol. The forefathers of the present people who call themselves Mayas are not the builders of the old Yucatan structures. The principal structures at Chichen Itza are still standing, but in ruins. These were built during the Khan dynasty and the Peiyu dynasty. The structures of the Peiyu dynasty are easily recognizable by their having in some prominent position the Peiyu totem, which was an elephant, or, as shown on the structures, the head of an elephant. Pedro Beltram in Art del Idioma Maya in the Maya sculpture, particularly on the trunks of the mastodon heads that adorn the most ancient buildings. On all buildings erected during the Khan dynasty, their emblem, the feathered serpent, was many times carved upon its stones. This accounts for the numberless feathered serpents found on the buildings at Chichen Itza. In battle and on state occasions, the feathered serpent appeared on the royal banner. As an example, on page 231 is a drawing of Prince Ko, the youngest son of the last King Khan, in battle, with the royal emblem surrounding and protecting him. This is one of the murals in Prince Ko's funeral chamber, Memorial Hall, Chichen Itza. In this chamber, the life of Prince Ko is shown in pictures from his boyhood to the day of his death. Here in Yucatan, tens of thousands of years afterwards, we find a custom retained which was observed in Niven's lowest buried city, described by him as the life of a shepherd. Wherever the feathered serpent is seen, carved, or painted, it will always be found to be in some way connected with the royal family of Khan. The Khan dynasty was the last reigning line of Maya monarchs of Mayaks. The last of the dynasty was Queen Mu. She visited the Maya Nile colony in Egypt during the first century of its existence, 16,000 years ago, as related in the Troano manuscript. The present natives of Yucatan are not pure-blooded. What remained of the Maya stock after the great cataclysm had destroyed the country were conquered by a Mongol race. The men were put to the sword and the women enslaved, and the forced marriages that followed introduced the Mongol blood in their veins. Thus, when the land was again settled after the cataclysm, it was by races that knew nothing of the builders of the vast structures which lay all about. This is verified by the fact that when Cortes invaded Yucatan, Bishop Landa, who accompanied him, asked the natives, "Who built the old ruins?" The answer he received was, "The Toltecs." Toltec is a Maya word meaning builder. Therefore their answer was, "The builders." But who the builders were they knew not, as Landa has stated in his writings. It will be interesting to note there that the word Toltec means not a race, but a builder. In Mexico there is a very ancient Aztec tradition which says that the first settlers in Mexico were a white race. The tradition continues, saying, "This white race was conquered by a race with darker skins, and the darker-skinned race drove the white race from the land. The white people then took their ships and sailed to a far-off land in the east toward the rising sun, and there settled." A prophecy accompanies the tradition, which is, "At some future time this white race will return and claim and reconquer the land." Rider Haggard must have found this same tradition, for in Montezuma's Daughter he says, Quetzal, or more properly Quetzalcoatl, was the divinity who is fabled to have taught the natives of Anahuac all the useful arts, including those of government and policy. He was white-skinned and light-haired. Finally, he sailed from the shores of Anahuac for the fabulous country of Hapalan in a bark of serpent skins. The Guatemalan tradition about the blonde-white race, the first inhabitants of America, is without doubt the clearest of all, because in Guatemala was Quetzal's capital city. The Guatemalan tradition is as follows. When King Quetzalcoatl, with the very white race, was conquered by the invading darker race, he refused to surrender, saying that he could not live in captivity, he could not survive. He then, with as many of his people as his ships could carry, sailed to a far-off land in the direction of the rising sun. He reached with his people this far-off land, and there settled. They prospered and became a great people. During the great battle many escaped and fled into the forest, and were never heard of again. The rest were taken prisoners and enslaved by the conquerors. The Quetzal today is the national bird of Guatemala. The name Quetzal was given to it in memory of their last white king, Quetzalcoatl. This bird was selected because, like King Quetzal, it cannot be made to survive in captivity. The wonderful old sacred book of the Quiches, the Popol Vuh, was written in Guatemala. The Aztec tradition about the white race, like all Aztec traditions, is very much garbled and filled in with priestly myths and inventions. I will point out a few prominent inventions and additions. I say they are inventions and additions because they do not appear in any of the other dozen, at least, traditions. All, with this exception, agree with each other in all material points. These Aztec changes have been the cause of leading some of our prominent archaeologists away from the straight and narrow path of truth and reason. The Aztecs began to drift into the Mexican Valley about AD 1090, but it was not until about the year AD 1216 that they made an actual settlement in the valley. The Aztecs originally formed a part of the empire of Mayax, and Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, was their symbol for the deity. It was also the symbol of the Quiches, who were their neighbors. The exact date of Quetzal's reign is unknown, because he was driven out by the darker people, whom we know as Mayas. Evidences seem to show that he lived more than 34,000 years ago. Again, other evidences would seem to point him out as belonging to one of the 11 dynasties. Whichever way it is taken, it answers my purpose, as it shows Quetzal to have lived far back beyond 16,000 years ago. One of the Aztec changes was made in their southern home before they settled in the Mexican Valley. They abandoned a symbol used for the deity and adopted the great white king Quetzal as their god. They then invented a son for him whom they called Tezcat. They said Tezcat was then made to escape with his father Quetzal. The next step was to invent a prophecy, so one was invented which ran, Tezcat's spirit will return in the body of a white man with many soldiers. He will conquer and retake the country, putting the men to the sword and enslaving the women. With this they proceeded to awe the people from the king down. Constant sacrifices were demanded to propitiate Tezcat, human sacrifices commenced, then the priestly power was complete. Priesthood was in absolute control. The people lived in dread, for anyone might be the next one called upon to stretch upon the bloody stone. At the time Cortes invaded Mexico, the Aztec human sacrifices were going on at the rate of from 30,000 to 40,000 a year, if we can believe Spanish writers. This spark of savagery flew to all parts of the world, Egypt, India, Phoenicia, etc. Our archaeologists have apparently found something Aztec dating 1100 to 1200 AD, the period during which Quetzal was made the god of the Aztecs, and have published the erroneous statement that Quetzal lived only a few hundreds of years ago. The name Quetzal is much intertwined with the very ancient history of Mexico and Central America. It even extends to our southwestern states, Arizona and New Mexico, for there the Pueblo Indians used in their religious rites and ceremonies the feathered or bearded serpent and called it Quetzalcoatl. Joining and comparing the various traditions, it would appear that far back there was a white people dominating Mexico and Central America, that they formed a kingdom, and the name of their last king was Quetzal. Why Quetzalcoatl was used in their religious ceremonies and rites, the Pueblo Indians of today apparently cannot tell. Each one has a different tale. The true import has been lost. It is now solely traditional. The empire of Mayax was made up of at least 7 distinct peoples, all coming from the motherland, and apparently all speaking the Maya tongue. All the kings and queens of Mayax during the 12 dynasties were of the white race. The last white race was the forerunner of the Latins, the forefathers of the white Polynesians of today, the forefathers of the white Mayas of Yucatan, and the forefathers of all our white races were one and the same. Chapter 13. The Geological History of Mu. After having read thus far, it will be of interest to learn the geological history of Mu, and to know the scientific cause of her destruction. I have already shown how the subterranean foundation of this vast continent was undermined by the volcanic gases. Granite, the primary rock in the formation of the Earth's crust, appears to have been honeycombed with huge chambers and cavities, and these were filled with highly explosive volcanic gases. When these chambers were emptied of their gases, the supporting roofs caved in, and the submersion of the land above logically followed. My investigations have proved that the calamity which overtook this early civilization was due to the emptying of a series of isolated upper gas chambers that were upholding the land and which were probably connected with each other by cracks and fissures. In order to make clear to the reader what I mean when referring to upper, middle, and lower chambers and isolated chambers, I have made a sketch of groups of Achaean gas chambers together with an explanation. I have intentionally drawn the chambers higher than was actually the case in order to emphasize them. Sketch of Achaean gas chambers, figure 1a. I here give the upper and part of the second series, each division showing groups of chambers at varying depths from the Earth's surface. This sketch depicts a somewhat similar condition to that which existed below the surface of Mu before that ill-fated continent vanished forever beneath the waters of the Pacific. The upper series is given as being 15 miles in depth, the middle series will be from 15 to 30 miles, and the lower series from 30 miles to the Earth's molten center. The upper series is arranged in 3 divisions, O, X, and W. Division O runs from the Earth's surface down to a depth of 5 miles. All chambers in this division are represented as being of the isolated variety. By isolated, I mean that they have no connections with the chambers below, or with the Earth's center, from which they might obtain additional gases that would over-encompass and blow them out. As they stand, no new gases can be driven into them, and unless additional gases are forced into them, they will stand as they are through all eternity. Division X runs from 5 to 10 miles below the Earth's surface. These are live chambers, constantly receiving from Division W fresh gases which pass from chamber to chamber through cracks and fissures. To drive additional gases into the isolated chambers of Division O, volcanic workings must first open cracks and fissures from chambers X to O, and then from O to O. Gases coming from the chambers of Division W, which are in communication with the Earth's center, must first flow into chambers X and over-encompass them. This would necessitate the raising of the roofs of these chambers to make room for the new gases. In raising the roofs, the rocks forming them would be split and fractured, forming passageways for gases from chambers X into chambers O. In time, Group O would become overcompressed. This would necessitate the raising of their roofs. Then the roofs of chambers O would have to be raised to accommodate the ever-increasing pressure from new gases. Their roofs would go up, split, and be punctured by the gases, which in the form of volcanoes would empty the chambers down to a point where the bolstering gases could no longer uphold the roof. What would be the result? Their roofs would crash down to their floors. The remaining gases would assume the form of huge flames and envelope the land as it went down. The surrounding waters would flow into the enormous hold, and the land would be submerged. Gas belts run at irregular depths below the Earth's surface. From various observations of certain phenomena covering a period of over 50 years, I have come to the conclusion that generally the great gas belts have been forged along the upper half of the middle series and the lower parts of the upper series. Gas belts do not run at regular distances below the Earth's surfaces, as I have indicated, but vary considerably. A section may run through Division W, the next section may be through Division X, and then back again into Section W. In short stretches they come to within a mile or two of the Earth's surface. This happens most often when they are approaching their safety valves, the volcanoes, as may be noted on Hawaii, Ecuador, Central America, and several other locations. It is safe to say that no belt runs below 20 miles from the Earth's surface, usually much less. My observations lead me to believe that their average depth is from 15 to 18 miles below the Earth's surface, except when they are approaching their volcanoes. Figure B. This shows the probable condition that underlay Mu before her submersion. A series of isolated chambers lay very near the surface of Mu, and their bolstering gases were upholding her. The next line of chambers were many miles below. Figure C shows a series of chambers, O corresponding with O in cuts A and B. These are connected with each other by fissures and passageways. Figure D shows the principal gas belts that now run under and around the Pacific Ocean. During the forging of the belts, chambers I-O, figure B, became over-compressed, causing cracks and fissures in the rocks above. Then the gases entered chambers O, where the same situation developed, and from there they escaped into chambers O. When this happened, the roofs of chambers O were punctured, the gases escaped, the land crashed down to the floors of the chambers, the waters of the Pacific flowed over, and Mu was no more. It is my belief that the supporting chambers which upheld Mu were very near the surface of the land. I base this opinion on the depths of the Pacific Ocean, the Troano manuscript, the Codex Cortesianus, and the Lhasa record. None of these records speaks of the land having been raised to any great height before sinking into the Pacific. They do say, however, that the land was rended and torn to pieces, quivering like the leaves of a tree in a storm, rising and falling like the waves of the ocean, and during the night went down, all of which could indicate that no great elevation of land took place, which would have been the case had the sustaining chambers been deep down. From the fact that the records say that Mu was twice upheaved, twice kicked from her foundations, it may be taken for granted that another or second series of isolated chambers lay below those supporting Mu, as shown in O1 and O2. The first upheaval was when the gases entered O1 from IO, and the second was when O1 broke into O2. That the chambers sustaining Mu were near the surface and not deep down is proved by the fact that, had they been deep down, the land would have been sufficiently thick to form retaining angles to uphold it after it had been raised, like our mountain ranges. Lands and continents have thus been submerged since the beginning of time. We have instances of this through the Precambrian times, the Paleozoic time, the Mesozoic and Cenozoic times, through the Pleistocene period, and down, in fact, to the very edge of history. This elimination of gas chambers and the resultant submersion of lands went on until a sufficient thickness of the primary rock was effected to permit of the rocks forming retaining angles when they were lifted, thus opening huge tunnels between continuous chambers and forming belts. When these gas belts were formed and completed, it practically put an end to this destructive submersion of land. It is geologically certain that the gas chambers which upheld Mu were eliminated during the forging of the Pacific Division of the Great Central Gas Belt and the Pacific Cross Belts with their many ramifications. From the presence of certain geological phenomena, I have thus come to the conclusion that it was a series of chambers that underlay and upheld Mu, and not one huge chamber, as was the case with Atlantis. I base this belief on the following evidence. 1. The difference in the depths of the Pacific Ocean between the various groups of islands shows that with each varying depth there was a different chamber, or one chamber under another that was eliminated. Had there been only one chamber, the bottom of the Pacific Ocean would be comparatively level. 2. We find that certain islands were once parts of the continent. Had there been only one chamber, these could not have remained above water. 3. These islands lay over the passageways between the chambers, and not over the chambers themselves. As there was no chamber beneath them, they did not go down. 4. That the chambers were connected is shown by the islands, revealing volcanic workings. The gases worked under them from chamber to chamber. This naturally changed their contour, and they became mountainous and jagged. My remarks on this subject are based upon careful investigations and observation on volcanic disturbances reported in the Pacific during the last 50 years. The islands and their characteristics have also been taken into consideration. There appear to be two main belts with many cross belts and ramifications. It is not only possible but probable that other ramifications exist when I have not shown. In fact, I believe there are, but I have never been able to define them. But how, will probably be asked, does this affect the story of Mu? If the reader will go back, he will recall that in a previous chapter describing the destruction of Mu, it was shown how these treacherous gas belts were the direct cause of the submersion which sent the motherland of man down in an abyss of scorching flames and rushing waters. There is no question in my mind but that the land of Mu was upheld by a series of upper isolated gas chambers marked in the diagrams O2. These gas chambers were the final assassins of Mu. The exact location, area, and height of each chamber is unknown. On surmise based upon the positions of the islands, I have given the location of several of these chambers. I do not presume to say that they are absolutely correct in all minute details, but they do show the honeycomb condition of the rocks directly under Mu, and the shallow depths of many parts of the Pacific Ocean show that they were near the surface. As a geological position, my next step will be to note a few of the many large extinct volcanoes that are to be found among the Polynesian islands. Up to the present time, nowhere upon the face of the earth are to be found evidences of volcanic outbursts equal to those found in Polynesia. These tremendous gaping mouths bear evidence of the compressed forces deep down within the earth's core that finally became unleashed and burst forth with a fury of destruction unequaled in the history of the world. Kilauea is an extinct volcano on one of the Hawaiian Islands, the crater of which measures 3 miles in diameter. Imagine a mouth of this size taxed to fullest capacity suddenly vomiting forth its destructive fire, smoke, and lava. A flood of fire, smoke, and lava 3 miles in diameter. To what height did it ascend? Without doubt, thousands of feet, when we consider the tremendous motive power behind it. Awe-inspiring as Kilauea was, there were probably others still larger. This appears to be a certainty when the following facts are considered. The size of the chamber that was being emptied of gases, the immeasurable quantities of gases in the chamber, the force exerted by the overcompressed gases forming the belt, and the weight of the land above that rested on them, and which finally forced them through the craters and released the demons of destruction that sprang at the throat of Mu and throttled her. Taking these facts into consideration, there is little cause for astonishment at the size of the extinct craters of Polynesia. The only astonishment is that there are any craters at all. With such forces working underneath the land, one wonders why the earth was not hurled into the sky by one mighty blast and dissolved like mist instead of being punctured and checkerboarded with volcanoes. When the northern main division of the great central gas belt was completed through the Pacific, a safety valve was formed to take care of future accumulations of the belt in this section. A new crater pierced through the center of Kilauea. This new crater is only 300 yards in diameter and is called Halemaumau. While Halemaumau is only 1/18th of the diameter of Kilauea, it nevertheless ranks among the largest craters of today and gives an idea by comparison of the enormity of its predecessor. The northern main Pacific division of the great central gas belts runs directly under the Hawaiian Islands. At the Hawaiian Islands it is nearer to the surface than at any other point along its whole course, which encircles the central part of the earth. The Neofo is another famous crater that is of interest to the archaeologist. Neofo is a small island to the northeast of the Fiji Islands, nearly midway between Fiji and Samoa. The Neofo extinct crater is 2 miles in diameter. Since the time it helped in the work of submerging the land of Mu, it was filled up with water and now forms a lake. The foregoing are only conspicuous examples of the many immense extinct volcanoes found among the Polynesian islands. We doubt if anything in the nature of volcanic disturbances has ever before or since in the earth's history happened that would compare in horror to the appalling cataclysm that befell the race of man when these volcanic workings blew off the lid of the earth and destroyed the land of Mu. Geology tells us that the western shores of North America were once raised. Geology has ever been guilty of putting the cart before the horse, and this is one more instance. Instead of the western shores of North America having been raised and the shoreline thus extended, it was, as a matter of fact, the lowering of the level of the Pacific Ocean that extended the shorelines. The land of Mu was an immense continent covering nearly one half of the Pacific Ocean. In some places, the ocean went down thousands of feet in order to fill up this vast hole, which was from 5,000 to 6,000 miles long and at least 2,000 or 3,000 miles broad. To the present depths of the ocean, the surrounding waters had to be drawn upon. To have maintained the original level of the Pacific Ocean after Mu went down, twice as much water would have been required as was then contained in the whole of the ocean. This could not be possible except by drawing the waters from surrounding areas and shores, and when this was done, there was still not enough water to bring the ocean up to its original level. Mu was not the only land that had went down into the Pacific Ocean. An immense northern area was also submerged, and also a smaller area to the west. It may be asked, how did it happen that the waters of the Atlantic Ocean did not flow upon Cape Horn into the Pacific Ocean, and thus level off the waters again without drawing them away from surrounding shores? In answer to this, I say that the Atlantic Ocean had its own troubles to attend to during this period of the Earth's history, as the following list of submerged lands will show. The land of Mu in the Pacific Ocean, which was several thousands of miles long and thousands of miles wide, the Bering Land Bridge in the North Pacific Ocean, connecting America with Asia, this bridge was not the narrow strip of land assigned to it by geology. Its southern shoreline ran from Alaska to Kamchatka by way of the Aleutian Islands. Its northern shore I am unable to trace, but it was in the Arctic Ocean. This submerged land has furnished scientists with a scapegoat to account for all the unaccountable things in America. Whenever anything has come up that could not be understood by the scientists, and that is quite frequent, it has always agreeably settled among themselves that it undoubtedly came to America from Asia by way of the Bering Land Bridge. Why Asia should have been selected to account for what is unaccountable, I cannot imagine, except that, as nothing is known about Eastern Asia, there was no fear of contradiction. Then there are the Pacific minor submersions. A stretch of land running down from California to the northwest corner of Colombia went down. This, apparently, was a narrow strip. Land was also submerged where the Malay archipelago now stands, but the extent of this land is not known. Atlantis was situated in the center of the Atlantic Ocean. It was an immense continental island, and at the time of its submersion it was the center of the Earth's civilization. Then there was the overland road to Europe in the North Atlantic Ocean. This was land between America and Greenland and Norway, together with a great triangular piece whose western line ran from Iceland to Cape Finisterre in the northwest corner of France. A small area of land also went down off the coast of Central America, which before submersion was a part of the mainland. All of these submersions were caused by the volcanic workings during the forging of the gas belts. The Great Central Belt submerged Mu and Atlantis. The Pacific Circuit Belt submerged the Bering Land Bridge. The Appalachian Iceland-Scandinavian Belt submerged the overland route to Europe. By the lowering of the levels of the ocean, many lands emerged from the water, and the shorelines of remaining lands were extended. Apparently all these great areas of land were thickly peopled, so that the loss of life was appalling. Without doubt hundreds of millions perished. Mu alone accounted for 64 million. This geological cycle is a complete confirmation of all the data previously furnished about the land of Mu.